Hello, Avila Advantage students. We're now in week 4, so after this week, we are actually halfway done through the course. So again, these courses move very quickly online, so just stay on top of things and you'll do fine. We're here on Sunday, February 26th, so February is almost wrapped up. I should have week 3 graded by Tuesday or Wednesday, so I'm looking forward to reading your papers this week. But this coming week, just remember, continue with your quiz, your homework, your forum discussion. You're going to have a forum discussion out there that ties into our chapter reading materials, deals with inflation. So you're going to kind of be asked to go back and pick something that you purchased earlier in time and see if it compares with today's inflation rate. So you think historically, inflation in the United States has averaged maybe about 3% a year. And some items have outpaced that in the price of inflation. Others have stayed under that. So recently we've had relatively low inflation, but we're starting to see it push back up again. And that's why the Federal Reserve is probably likely going to raise some interest rates this year too, to kind of put the brakes on inflation in case the economy starts to heat up a little bit. So they don't want it to grow too fast because inflation can have impacts. Also remember, you have your exam this week, so it's going to be available towards the weekend. So just make sure when you jump into that exam, it is a timed exam. So make sure you're in a quiet place from reduced distraction, somewhere that you can get it finished, and you should do fine. So, all right, with the chapter materials again, with chapter 22, going back to inflation, how we measure inflation is used as a basket of goods. So typically we think of like the consumer price index being this basket of goods, and the basket has to stay consistent, relatively consistent. So if it's just a basket of hot dogs and Cokes, we look at the price of a hot dog and Coke in 2015, and we look at that same price of a hot dog and Coke in 2016. And if the basket goes up in price, we would look at that percentage change. So that's what we're interested in measuring the inflation rate. The CPI is a measure that kind of takes into consideration a typical household goods set, but it doesn't cover everything. So it's not as broad-based as like a GDP deflator, but it is a good measurement. And we use it often for things such as Social Security increases. So every year, Social Security establishes an increase in the payment citizens may receive based on some inflation rate. Sometimes contracts at work are based on some type of CPI or index. So you'll read quite a bit about the inflation process, and inflation can be both a good thing and bad thing. It's good if it is small and it's showing signs of growth, because that's lower unemployment. There's demand for goods and services that are pushing up the price. But at the same time, it can be bad if there's wealth effects, and that's if, let's say, for example, if you get no wage increase this year and inflation does go up maybe about 2.6% this year, then you're actually worse off. So in real returns, you can buy less goods and services. So that's something that our government, especially on the fiscal side and the monetary side, are concerned with, because that can have wealth effects. All right, chapter 23, you get into the international balance of trade. So it talks about the current account. What you think of the current account as the actual physical goods and services. And that's when we typically think of like a trade deficit we've had for many years. So we've got to enjoy many goods and services this way. We would not enjoy the standard of living that we have today without trade. And there's a lot of concern right now with trade and what could possibly happen. But we'll just have to see how it plays out. But from we call a capital account perspective, I want you to think of that as like the actual inflows and outflows of cash, if you will. So although we're running trade deficits, where we're definitely importing more than we're exporting, we're able to finance that. So essentially it's other nations that are financing our expenditures. And as long as they're willing to buy U.S. Treasury bills, notes, and bonds, we can enjoy those goods and services. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just that we're able to maintain the standard of living. So as long as U.S. debt is relatively safe, and it is compared to the rest of the world, there's a lot of other riskier investments out there. So that's why a lot of other foreign nations like to park their money in the United States, and they're willing to buy those assets. But in this chapter, they have a brief segment too about comparative advantage. And in trade, A country can have an absolute advantage. That means they can produce it with fewer goods and resources at a lower cost, but you can't do it in a comparative advantage in a comparison between two goods. One country is going to have a lower opportunity cost. So I'll give an example, say Japan and us in the United States. We probably have a really low opportunity cost producing wheat. We have a lot of land, we're much more efficient at it, but probably Japan can produce maybe small engine motors much more efficiently than we can. So the idea is that we say, in theory, we'll produce the wheat, you produce the engines, and we'll engage in trade. It doesn't exactly happen that way with physical goods, but since they have the comparative advantage with small engines, we have comparative advantage with producing wheat, we make each other better off. And without trade, we'd be an isolated island. We would not enjoy the amount of goods and services that we have today. So, well, that's a summary this week. If you do have any questions, do email me. Looking forward to the forum discussion post. Just make sure to jump in there early. And otherwise, have a great week, and we'll talk to you online. Take care.